time for our Sunday Live interview. Thank you so much for your questions. You're bringing them in on 22422, and I'll be posing them shortly to Musalia Mudavadi, the leader of the Amani National Congress, who joins me now in studio. Thank you very much for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
I want to begin with national issues before we get into your presidential ambitions and the politics of ANC. Tomorrow's CORD anti-IEBC protests seem scheduled to continue despite the fact that they have turned violent. The police have said that they should not be on the streets. You have previously disputed the president's position that he has really no powers to send these commissioners home. You said he's, quote, hiding behind the Constitution. How exactly can he force IEBC commissioners out?
Well, first of all, let me just say that the right to protest is deeply enshrined in our Constitution. And when any particular group or constituency, in that matter, over any particular issue feel that they have to protest, they are doing so legally, and we hope that this will be recognized. And then at the same time, we would expect that that protest is peaceful and it does not turn into a violent undertaking. And we also hope that when such thing happens, either today or tomorrow, because there could be other protests on other issues in the years to come, we should also expect the police to ensure that they provide security for the protesters so that they do their march, they express their position without any damage or injury being caused to anybody. Now, the second issue that one needs to bring out is that, yes, I did say that the president should not hide behind the law on this particular issue. I don't think anybody is expecting the president to take a pen and sign off that the commissioners at IEBC have been relieved of their duties. But he still remains the custodian, the principal custodian of the Kenyan Constitution.
So what can he practically do about this impasse?
In this impasse, the president should take the lead. It was not too long ago that the president took up an issue and went to Parliament and made a statement on issues of graft. And in the process, he said that if there are any individuals who have an issue, he would expect them to step aside. And then once the process of investigation is done, then either they can be reinstated or they would have moved out of office. And I can tell you very clearly that on a matter like this, I personally believe that the president should take it very seriously, because it's threatening to degenerate into an insecurity problem.
You think he should make a statement to the effect that IEBC commissioners implicated in some form of wrongdoing should step aside?
He can use whatever method, but I can tell you, if he's a head of state and he called the commissioners and he said that, observing from the trends that are going on, the country seems to have lost a lot of faith in your ability to conduct free and fair elections. And here we are talking of not a stand-by-night individuals. We are talking of serious institutions. The church has expressed its concern. The labor movement has expressed its concern. The diplomatic society has expressed its concern. And now the constituency is growing, not just the political players, but a lot of people seem convinced that the IEBC is ill-placed to conduct the next elections. So I think the president should take it more seriously and find ways of ensuring that he can lead from the front and facilitate a process where there could be serious and genuine dialogue to deal with this issue.
All right, so not a legal route, a political process.
Well, once you're in that kind of position, you can take a political process. You can initiate a process that can bring people together. Okay. But at the same time, if I was a commissioner in the IEBC and the president of the nation said that there's a serious concern, and this concern is growing by the day amongst other Kenyans, you as the person who is supposed to ensure that the principle of democracy is properly enshrined, you would have to say, look, I think there's something serious here. Okay. I better move off.
As a would-be presidential contender in 2017, are you concerned about the political climate going into that election?
Yes, I am. I am concerned. We all know what we have gone through when we have these heightened tensions prior to an election. And Kenya's history has that pattern, dating back to the 90s, once the multi-party process began. We have seen it in 92, we have seen it in 97, we saw it in 2002, albeit on a smaller scale, and then we saw it on a very large scale in 2007. Now, clearly, these trends must stop.
Part of that trend
yes.
has been street protests that turned violent, and yet you support CORD's current protests, which one the police have said that they haven't even received formal notification thereof, so that they can actually be legally recognized protests. What's your take on street demonstrations? Do they really help advance democracy, or can it possibly turn into a situation of anarchy should the protests continue much longer?
You see, street protests are constitutional. The right to protest is constitutional. And I don't speak for CORD, but one of the things that one would be asking is that give it to them. They have said that they want to protest every other Monday. So how would the police say that they're not aware about these processes? So that is something that they have to sort out amongst themselves, because it cannot be possible that they have been indicating.
It's just a formality of the process,
yes.
that one must actually go and, you know.
Well, that now will be a challenge that would remain in the hands of CORD and the police. But I think the point I'm trying to make here is this: protests arise normally when one side is becoming intransigent or is not listening to what is going on. Now, these are not protests against the government of the day. These are protests against the IEBC.
Right.
So I think it is important that the government of the day realizes that there is something that is being said about the IEBC, and it would be important that action be taken.
All right, I want to move to politics and backtrack to the 2013 at the height of the presidential campaigns, and the reports emerged that now President Kenyatta, then a possible candidate, had actually endorsed you, and you were seen as a compromise candidate. 2 days later, it says the devil was in the detail, and the story changed. Did you feel betrayed by the current Jubilee leadership? Do you still feel betrayed by them?
You know, one of the things that I say is that that is water under the bridge. They defaulted on a program where they came forward to me seeking that we team up with them. It never worked. They went back on their word. Surely, now we are in the year 2016, heading to 2017.
Do you think they can be trusted?
I'm not going to waste my time looking at that anymore. But the issue of whether they can be trusted is very clear. I mean, they defaulted on what they had voluntarily decided to put on the table. I did not default. So the issue of whether they can be trusted, let me put it very simply. If they could do that to me, as Musalia Mudavadi, what can they not do to an ordinary citizen?
So what would you describe your relationship now with the president and the deputy president as?
I recognize them as the people who are holding office today. But in terms of politics, they have their job to do. And I have my assignment to do, and that is to seek the presidency in 2017.
And that would not include the thoughts of a coalition of some form with Jubilee? Would it include thoughts of a coalition with CORD?
No, let me put it this way. As we stand now, Amani National Congress, as a party, we are consolidating. We are working out. Our constitution, yes, does allow for affiliations and coalitions, because that is now part of Kenya's political landscape. But as to any coalition, at this stage, let me tell you, we are not thinking about that. We have 1 year to go, and this 1 year we have to consolidate the political party called ANC.
You don't trust President Kenyatta and the Deputy President. Do you trust Raila Odinga?
Why is this coming into the issue, frankly speaking? Because these are competitors.
It's your observation of competitors.
These are competitors. We are all in the race. I'm neither in COD, neither am I in Jubilee. We must be able to recognize that there is room and there is space for other Kenyans who do not necessarily subscribe to either Jubilee or COD, and I'm one of those.
So you see yourself as a compromise candidate, a third force?
I don't see myself as a compromise candidate necessarily. I think maybe that's the wrong word. I see myself as a Kenyan, a serious Kenyan who has the capacity, who has the ability to lead just like any other Kenyan. And it is for the Kenyan people to eventually decide who they want to vote in. You see yourself with that capability, but you were proven wrong in the last election in that attempt. What have you learned from that failed bid? Well, losing an election does not mean that one has been proven wrong. There are people who have ruled countries, including here, where Kibaki made an attempt more than once, and he got it in the third time. Did that mean that Kibaki had no ability to lead this country? So I think that's a wrong notion. Perhaps he did not have the right estimation of the public's reception towards him at that particular point. I think what we need to put across is that let us have the resilience, which I have, and I'll continue respecting the wishes and the will of the people of Kenya when it comes to casting their vote. And as the more I put across my case, if I can persuade them, and I hope I will persuade them, then I can be voted in. Arguably, you've not been able to persuade all the people in your own backyard, Western Kenya, during the burial of Jacob Juma, the question of Luhya unity, the ever elusive question of Luhya unity, and having, you know, this region come together behind one candidate came up again. How important do you think that would be to your own presidential ambition? I think there's a myth here, which I hope we can debunk tonight. There is a misconception that has been perpetuated, I don't know why, that it is wrong for the Luhya community to have more than one presidential candidate. I think we got to debunk this myth. If you look back in Kenya's history, political history, and the more recent one is the election of 2013, we had Uhuru, who is a native of central Kenya. So was Peter Kenneth, so was Paul Mwite, and so was Martha Karua. Now, when the voters decided to vote, the majority of the voters in the region decided to vote for Uhuru Kenyatta. But did you ever see Uhuru Kenyatta, Paul Mwite, Martha Karua and Peter Kenneth go into a boardroom to discuss the issue of Kikuyu unity? No, they did not. Previously, we have seen Orengo contest against... but the region did largely vote behind him, whereas in Western Kenya it is pretty much a kind of split vote. And that would be what people refer to as, you know, an ununited Luhya vote. Do you not think that you need to consolidate that vote? I think other Kenyans ought to learn from the Luhya. Other Kenyans ought to learn from the Luhya and respect the Luhya for their voting patterns. We have shown time and again that there is absolutely nothing wrong in voting for somebody who is a non-Luhya. So we are actually putting a very serious case across that don't turn it around and make it look like it is a problem of the Luhya people. Let us turn around and ask whether this problem is actually in the other people who have shown that... This is a strength, you see. Yes, it is a strength, who keep on showing that they cannot vote for anybody outside their ethnic group. Their ethnic group. Okay, so what do you think of Moses Wetangula's bid? I suppose you welcome it. It's perfectly in order. He has his constitutional right to be able to do that, and there's nothing wrong in that. What do you offer the Western Bloc and the National Bloc over Moses Wetangula, Eugene Wamalwa and the other very vocal leaders from Western region? I think insofar as the presidential campaign is concerned, I'm the only one who has in the recent times actually contested from the Western Kenya region. In 2013, I was the only Luya candidate, if you may put it that way, from the Western Kenya region. Now, we don't know what will happen in 2017. There could be more players who may want to throw their hat in the ring. So we'll respect it as it is. It will be the decision made by the Kenyan voter.
I touched on this but briefly in passing, so let me just return to it proper. The question of the late Jacob Juma. Do you, as a leader from Western Kenya, do you believe it was a politically instigated assassination?
I think that would be speculation. And emotions, and especially when you're talking about death under such circumstances is something that one wants to handle very, very carefully. And I'm not a leader who would want to whip up unnecessary emotion. I think the challenge here is for the investigative agencies to thoroughly investigate every possible lead that comes before them or that is brought to their knowledge, so that they exhaust and come to Kenyans with a factual position. Do you trust the current government to get to the bottom of that killing? Well, they are the only ones who have the powers at this point in time to investigate. And I think it would be foolhardy for them not to take this thing seriously. Because if you do not, then the process will roll out more and more people will be emboldened to take other people's lives unfairly. So it is the obligation of the government of the day, and for now it lies squarely with the Jubilee government to make sure that this process is investigated and the culprits are brought to book. To other matters, what do you think of Kenya's planned closure of the Dadaab refugee camp? This is a major decision. On this one, what I would say is that there is some genuine concern from the part of the Kenyan people that Dadaab has been in place for close to 25 years or more. And we have seen genuine concerns that it has sometimes harbored terrorists. So that is a real concern. The other concern is that it is taking too long for the situation in Somalia to stabilize. And I can tell you, because previously I was in the Treasury when I was Minister for Finance. And one of the challenges that any government that is involved in this kind of initiative comes up with is that when the United Nations agency or the Human Rights Agency does not remit what is supposed to be remitted there, then the government that is hosting these refugees is forced to go into its own coffers. You would close the camp? To the taxpayers' coffers. You would close the camp? You support President Kenyatta? It is something here that I would say that let them handle it very carefully, because we have international obligations. But at the same time, I think the international community should be more serious. As Commander-in-Chief, what would you do? Let me just clarify this. You can see, for instance, the refugee crisis in the Middle East. All of a sudden, the European countries and the West, for instance, have pledged about $2 billion to assist Turkey in deal with the refugee crisis. Right. Yeah, Kenya has never received that kind of pledges, let alone the actual commitment on those pledges, because sometimes pledges are made but they are not honored. But you can see the magnitude of the situation. So if the international community wants Kenya to play its important role, then they should also give the Kenyan nation similar support in a situation like this. So I hear you saying, as president, you would say pay up the pledges or we'll close the camp. I think that is something that we would say is valid. All right. What do you think about Kenyan troops remaining embedded in AMISOM in Somalia? I think it's also a tricky issue, but they have to play their role at this point in time. And if the time comes for withdrawal, I believe it must be withdrawal that is properly coordinated within the international framework, not a haphazard withdrawal of any particular group of the troops. It has to be structured so that by the time that withdrawal is done, it is done when there's a stable government in Somalia. And here there are so many examples. If we see what has happened in a place like Libya, and we see what has happened in some of the countries in the north lately, where interventionist forces have gone in and then they have withdrawn without a clear follow-up plan and backup plan, those countries are left worse off than before.
So you're saying, as president, for now you would keep the troops there until there's a stable government?
Yes, it's important.
All right. There's been a stalemate in passing, the requisite legislation, if you would move along, on the 2/3 gender rule. This failed again just a couple of weeks ago. We're heading to another constitutional deadline in August. What do you think of this whole situation, and what would you possibly do as president? We saw President Kenyatta, rally his troops and say, go past this bill, it's still flopped. What would you do to ensure that this actually sails through?
I think I would actually open up a discussion on not just within the area of the parliamentarians alone. I think broaden the discussion to other Kenyans and see if perhaps if we cannot amend the law through that process, whether we can also amend it with a broader constituency of the Kenyans.
To what position?
Well, to still maintain the situation where there is that parity, there is that affirmative action that we all voted for. But in principle, you realize that nobody went into the details to actually see how it would be implemented. So at this point in time, you may not want to rely on Parliament alone to be able to deal with this issue.
And yet I still don't get a clear answer.
That means it may go back to a referendum.
You think this issue should go to a referendum? Yeah. Okay. I'll just take one or two questions that were not part of what I have added. I think you've touched very clearly on the fact that you are not a loyal Jubilee Alliance supporter. Nebuchadnezzar Alphas, your question is answered. You have answered the issue of Wetangula's presidential bid. Perhaps you would tell us, Peter Mwendi, aka Boy, is asking, Honorable Mudavadi, do you think our economy is growing well under the Jubilee government?
No. We are seeing a lot of statistics about it growing well, but the reality is that the hardship for the Kenyans is still very high. We have seen a lot of massive projects or grandiose projects being put on the table to be implemented, but at the same time the growth of debt, our public debt, has grown so rapidly, and therefore we have now seen the government of Kenya, for instance, freezing any further programs because they do not have the resource base. Secondly, KRA is beginning to post every other day an indication that they have fallen short of some of their targets. We are also seeing indicators that the cost of some of these programs is beginning to undermine our status within the East African community. Classic example is the decision of Uganda to move its pipeline connection through Tanzania rather than Kenya. Rwanda now says they would rather link up on the railway through that place. So these are indicators that the cost in Kenya is becoming prohibitive, and not just to the Kenyan people themselves, but even to the regional players. Let me give you another quick example.
Very briefly.
Now, one of the things that is happening is that if you import any product, you have to pay your SGR levy. So many companies are paying this amount, and I have talked to some industrialists. Some are ending up paying up to about $250,000 in a year on a cost that was never really there. So that is something that you need to. If you go into construction, you now pay the county government of the day. You pay NEMA, and then now lately you pay sometimes you pay the National Water Agency. You then pay the National Construction Organization. All percentages being taken off the investor. Clearly, There are too many levies being introduced.
All right.
Yeah.
Musalia Mudavadi, the leader of the ANC and possibly a presidential candidate come 2017. Thank you for your time.
I would have said possibly the president.
Oh, is it?
Okay,
well, we will wait and see. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Of course, you're watching Sunday Live. Stay with us. We're back with more news after this.